I know it's kind of putting you on the spot there, but I kind of want to. I'm young, so I'm allowed.
And you know what? God love you. Keep that. Number one, part of the problem last go around is getting involved with in the primary with congressional delegation. I have not wanted that. I don't think any of the other candidates, for the most part, wanted the same kind of problem. So I've asked them to stay out of the primary and get involved after the primary. I'm a congressional candidate. I believe I should be doing the same. I am Paul Gosar. I am not John McCain. I am Paul Gosar. I am not J.D. Hayward. Find out the difference. You have a homework assignment. Yes?
No. How do you stand on Israel?
I support Israel. Full-heartedly. Full-heartedly. And I'm embarrassed right now. I am embarrassed about this, the way this administration and the way we are treating people. It's a shame.
But NASA's taking care of that.
Go. You know what? I do want to talk about NASA. I got to tell you a funny story. So I went back to Washington, D.C., and the aeronautic people wanted to talk to me. And it was the day that they were cutting NASA. I don't know if you know, but a lot of us benefited from NASA. And I want to tell you a story about dentistry. Do you know dentistry really benefited? About 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we had these god-awful looking crowns. Okay? But what they used to do, because there was only so many particles of porcelain in a unit's face, but to get those shields through space, they had to make them stronger. So they had to take the particle size and engineer them so they're a lot smaller. Well, guess what came with it? The ability to make these beautiful crowns that have transparencies, all sorts of different things with it. Memory wire that they use for orthodontics, where they'll see a kid one time and don't see him again for 4 to 6 months. They have to keep it in the refrigerator. Was made by NASA. We have to embellish and we have to invest in our future and our sciences. We have to. We have to, we have to, we have to. Unfortunately, they've been calling me back because they had to cancel that meeting. When are we going to get the chance to see you? And I said, not for a while. Yes, sir.
What's your views on cap and trade, and how far do you see it going?
I'm against cap and trade. Number one is we have to have a comprehensive energy policy, and that means everything's on the table. Once again, everything is on the table. So we have to look at it from a standpoint that financially we can't afford to do this. That's number one. Can we work it on our own benefit? You betcha. We can look at this. There's no reason why we can't make this better. There's no reason why we can't be utilizing coal better and better and better. Our youth should be instilled to benefit, to make sure that we have better processes to make coal much better. But we can't be saddled with this. This can't work. That goes from nuclear energy to even to green energy.
What about 0-point energy?
What about it?
It's free. No meter.
Well,
What about that?
I think when you start looking at your wind and solar powers,
Exactly.
they're betterly based on communities. Okay? They're based on communities. Here in Arizona, here in Flagstaff, I mean, look at my house. I was one of the first greenhouses out in the county. I used styrofoam blocks when I built my house. The R factor, they can't calculate it. Embrace it, use it. How about solar here? It works extremely well, especially if you're going to make applications to hot water.
What about oil? You got more oil here than oil across Saudi Arabia.
I don't know about so much here. My dad's a geologist, by the way. Okay.
Well, I'm in the energy business also. So.
Okay. Our reserves, we've got some reserves, but we don't have the same type of reserves that they do probably like in Iraq. I will tell you the sensors in Iraq will actually, if they're right, Saudi Arabia is second fiddle to Iraq in the amount of oil reserves. But oil we got to use. What about natural gas? Let me talk to you about a state called Utah. Let me talk to you a state about Wyoming, first of all.
Colorado.
Between Pinedale, Wyoming and Rock Springs, Wyoming is one of the largest gas fields known to man. It's called the Jonah Field. They had so many cubic acres of feet of natural gas coming through. They actually had to do drilling at the same time. Do you know that there's a pipeline that goes from Wyoming all the way to California? Do you know that Utah is investing in all gas-powered vehicles? Natural gas. They have made a concerted effort. You know what? Right now, there are 1/16 of the rigs operating in Wyoming right now in the Jonah Field than there was 3 years ago. The reason being, gas is dirt cheap. Natural gas is dirt cheap. And we got tons of it. But we also have to use all the things that science gives us. Give you an example of what Arizona's doing. On those pipelines, you have a big reservoir coming through. To get down to residential, you got to get it into smaller volumes. They actually have some turbines that were tested here down in the Phoenix area, if I'm not mistaken, that actually generate their own electricity, and they're tied into electrical currents as they reduce the flow of gas. There's that science thing again. Got to invest in the science and got to get that science going. Yes, sir.
So why don't we, what's the holdup with producing power generation with natural gas? What's the holdup?
Say what?
What's the holdup with producing power with natural gas?
I don't know what the federal government, EPA. One of the things you're going to find out is that the regulatory body, the EPA, is also not your friend. They go unregulated. And that's things that you also better be aware of, is the regulation or the look at your water in the state. Here's one that's coming, because the EPA is going to challenge that, because their definition of a navigable waterway is your storm drain.
Yeah.
That means they got you coming and going. And let me tell you something else. If you control water in the western United States, and there's really two big ones that the last time I looked at my geography, it's called the Colorado and the Columbia. If you control those, you control everybody. And I guess back east looked at this as just a big parking lot, right? It's time that Arizona defends itself in the 10th Amendment. That's why you have to start looking at something as a state. Coming back to your question, water. If you are taken on by the EPA as just a sole one individual that owns some water rights, you lose. How about defining what your assets and liabilities are as far as water is concerned, both surface and subsurface, which Arizona actually does, one of the few states that do. Why don't you build a consortium, a loosely held network of actually knowing what you got as assets and reserves? You already do banking for California and Nevada. Define what you're going to do with your excesses in the good times and bad. Then start playing with Utah. Then start playing with Wyoming. What am I after? I'm after the Green River leg of the Colorado. Then go to Colorado and then start working with the Native Americans. Form a policy, a cohesive network that actually assets individual states, that identifies and supports the 10th Amendment. Start working with neighbors. I've got patients who actually live in the San Joaquin Valley. What if you were to play with them? Some of the most fertile ground in all the world. We have to start looking at our assets collectively. And we have to do it as a state first. First of all, we have to do it as a location, as a community, and then as a state, and then as a group of states within a region. I think that's the last I knew was how our forefathers got something done. Here's your sign, reinvent it. No, just follow the old template. Yes, sir.
Well, I got a question. Assuming that there's so much suspicion out there about our politicians from D.C. As a congressman, when you get into office, what can be done to go after the politicians who are actually stealing from the American people, who are in conspiracies to divert money to their own pocketbook or to their buddies? I mean, why can't we investigate what's going on with all these connections? Who's really running our government? Who's really pulling the strings? So many things, obviously they're not listening to the people in anything. They just keep going and spending money. But somebody's getting rich over this. How do we go back and investigate the people who are running the government, who are the crooks? How do we go and get them?
Well, we showed over and over that Congress is ill set up to govern their own. They don't do a good job, and they haven't done a good job. You know, Congressman Rangel is a good example. Why don't we start with an independent body that you have retired judges? God, retired judges love to keep active. Why don't we have an independent panel that investigates based upon that? How about we start there and see what that does?